today's event is hosted by Sy Syms graduate programs. For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Tamar Avnet. I am the, you guys hear me? I feel like I'm in and out, no?
Yeah, good.
So I'm the head of the graduate programs of Sy Syms, as well as the associate dean of Sy Syms. And I've been here at Sy Syms since 2007, first as a marketing professor, and now as the head of the graduate programs. So I don't know if you're aware, but in just 8 months, we have developed 4 graduate programs. We have 2 online programs and 2 on campus. So the online MBA, which is our program that we actually started with, it's 36 credits. We are really looking for people who are working professionals, but also if you have a job once you get out of school, this is a great degree to have. We have 3 different tracks. And also, we just reduced the tuition to $25,000, so it's a really good value. The next one that we have is completely new. We're just launching it. It's an online master in management, and this is really good for those who want to do quick 1 year, then go to consulting, advising, and those kind of job fits really well with undergrads that want to go directly to do a graduate degree. And also, this is now $19,000. Again, it's a new price and a good value. Next one. Also, I just want to introduce the 2 on campus. So those are face-to-face. Both of them are at our parent campus. The MBA one is very similar, obviously, to the one online, but it's in person. And then it's also STEM designated. So it's a little bit more quantitative, a little bit more focuses on technology. And then we have Master in Finance, which today our Director of Master in Finance is the one who's leading this event. And he will also talk a little bit about that, but not too much, don't worry. And that's also a STEM designated, and it is for those who want a career in finance, maybe a little bit different than an investment banker, want to do some other things. And part of the reason we're doing this talk is also to introduce you to what else one can do in finance that's not necessarily investment banker or the classic investment banker. Now, before we start, I do want to introduce to you the director of the MBA as well as the Master in Management, Dr. Pablo Hernandez Lagos. Forgive me, I am going to read from here. I have a little bit to say about you, don't worry. So Dr. Hernandez Lagos is an associate professor here in the chair of strategy and entrepreneurship. And he has his PhD from UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. His research explores the impact of generative AI on economic growth, and his work has appeared in leading journals such as Management Science, Nature, and the American Political Science Review. He also has publications in Harvard Business Review, Financial Times, and Bloomberg, and he teaches leadership and strategy at Sy Syms. So now, Pablo, you may come and talk
Thank you,
about the programs.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Pablo. Thank you for the kind introduction, Tamar. Thank you to our guests, everybody who made it. Our dean, where's our dean? There, our associate dean. So we are a tight, close family. Ross, thank you for coming. And of course, our students who are the reason we are here. I don't want to take much of your time. I want you to hear from our experts on quant and finance commodities and the tips about what to invest in the future. I got my tip already. I'm not going to tell you, but I have a tip. And start with C and ends with R. And the middle you say OPER. The MBA. So we have 3 programs in management, and they differ in the level of quantitative analysis. So because this talk is meant to be more quantitative, I will start from more quantitative MBA to less quantitative. So the MSF, you will hear a lot from our experts. That is very quantitative, and it's a very important skill to have. But then after you progress in your workplace, you will need to manage people. And the older, the more senior you get to manage more and more people. That's where you create your impact. And managing people is important, and it's really difficult. There's where the MBA comes in. In the MBA, you learn how to negotiate, you learn how to lead, you learn organizational behavior. So we have a program that is tailored to people who know the quant part and the personal part, the artificial intelligence and the human intelligence together. That will be our brand new on-campus MBA. That will start in the fall. We're working really hard to make the best program that we can do. The second one is our online MBA, the one that we are already running. That program has already about 60, 70 students. We are expecting a cohort of probably 50 more, so it's growing very fast. That program is not STEM designated, it's not quantitative, other than the basic things that we need to cover in strategy and finance and accounting. That program is for people who are already working, people who want to be promoted, people who want to get farther in their career. It usually saves you a few years of time and increases your salary. We calculate by 20, 25% a year. Of course, that's an average. The thing is that you take your MBA, your salaries go up. I cannot guarantee you that, but the correlation is very strong. The final one, the Master in Science in Management, is not an MBA. And that one is for those of you who do not have much experience leading, managing people. It's from people who have degrees on biosciences, on computer science, on art. If you want to lead in those fields, those industries that are not usually your field, leadership can be taught in a compressed way, and that's what we do in the Master of Science in Management. Without further ado, I want our associate dean to finish the talk.
I will. I also just want to mention something that basically Pablo said, but maybe to make it clear, when we have now AI, and people are saying, well, AI gonna replace me, they're taking over a lot of the stuff we're doing. People skill, they can't take. Managing a team, they can't do. Emotional intelligence, they don't have, and they probably would not. So the importance of these kind of degrees is actually increasing in the sense that it's teaching us to do what humans do best. So keep that in mind in your next few years. Okay, now I do want to start the main event. So first of all, I'm delighted to introduce Ellen. So Ellen Perl, it's really a pleasure and thank you for coming. So Ellen has built an impressive career at the intersection of metals, markets, and global trade, starting in metal training and supply chain, and going on to work at the legendary Philip Brothers in New York, one of the most influential commodity trading firms in the world. Sorry. He later played a key role in the growth of the zinc market as Vice President of Sales at Meadowbrook and Eagle Zinc before founding his own company, Perl Pigments, in 2003. Today, his company supplies critical zinc-based materials to industries ranging from paints and coating to rubber and ceramics. Alan will be in conversation with Dr. Assa Cohen. He's the director of the Master in Finance, and he joined us 2 years ago as an assistant professor of finance. He earned his PhD in economics from the University of Pennsylvania and was affiliated with the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia. His research focuses on how intermediary incentives and constraints shape liquidity provision in decentralized financial markets, particularly within the US corporate bond market. So I'm truly excited to hear the conversation between Ellen and Assa. The stage is yours. Enjoy. Looking forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come on.
זה אם יש שאלות.
קדמתי.
That's for questions. I think he should have one.
No.
No? Oh.
Okay. Oh. Speaker? Here? Yes. First of all, Ellen, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
If I may, before we begin, I just want to say
The speaker is not on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to say one quick things in my capacity as the director of the MSc Finance. Two quick things. I will not be as charming and as elaborate as a problem. I don't mind getting an MBA, and not deal
That's
with
very
this
nice.
sort of such risks. That's not what we're made of, I guess, in finance, we're better or worse. But I would say that two things. First of all, if you're going to graduate and you don't have a job lined up, come do the MS in finance. Especially if you're a good student, we are going to get you a job. We're going to get you a job that is lucrative as well. Second of all, if you're still earlier in your career, just know that next year I'll be teaching a course that is going to be called Financial Models with Python. And you're going to learn Python, and I promise you, you will get tools that are going to make you more attractive and are going to open positions for you. If you want to talk about it, you're very welcome. This series of talks is a part of what we really want to try to offer as a part of the master's program and its development. And in general, we want to also contribute to our community a bit more opening up of our students to the variety of things that are happening in the financial industry. If you go to a Sy Syms students and you ask them what they want to do, you're going to usually hear investment banking. And there is a whole world out there. And I'm so honored and happy to have Ellen here. I'm so grateful to have him here. He's going to talk to us about the fascinating world of commodities. So Ellen, thank you again.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Ellen, the first question I want to ask you is, we have talked, I think, 3 times by now, and in each one of our conversations, you pointed to me how much copper I have on the walls of my house.
I took a picture last night of our basement. I have it to show you if you want. There's copper everywhere.
I think it's amazing. I agree with you completely, but I think there is a strong passion
But I
there.
want to tell you, I sell zinc.
I know, so you need to know what's happening. So, but there is a strong passion because I feel from you that you feel that you're building the world. I mean, you're the electricity in the wires here, maybe on the copper, but I'm guessing the steel, and the zinc. So I'm curious to hear about your passion about this field, about the metals, and when was it developed, and what do you think is driving it?
Well, I think it's the applications. You really cannot live without it. You wouldn't realize it. but
Alan,
Yeah.
the thing is not on.
it's not on.
No, I think it is, but yeah, just talk closer.
Okay. Hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's applications. You see, trading stocks is really not an application except to your wallet. With copper or zinc, without it you cannot exist. And zinc is sprayed onto agricultural products. It's human consumption. It's in vitamins, small quantities. Don't take a lot of it. Okay? But copper is used in everything. It conducts electricity, all the piping, every commercial building, everybody's personal house. And so it's really application. You need it, you use it, you breathe it. You may not be aware of it. There is 5% zinc oxide in every tire made. You don't roll without it.
Yeah.
It's just a boring subject. You can't drive a car without it.
Yeah. And you made it to this field, if I recall correctly, your undergrad degree was in political science?
I was in poli-sci thinking about going into law when, after speaking to a very close personal friend who grew up together, he was going to work at Associated Metals and Minerals, and he started probably about a half year before me. And he told me what he was doing. It sounded interesting, sounded like big business, and honestly, it was a very Jewish industry.
Yeah.
And he was working in Rockefeller Plaza, and he kind of like clued me into it, and I got a request for a visit, like very simply. It really wasn't much of an effort. The second job was much more of an effort.
I'm curious to know about the second job, because one of the reasons we're doing this series of talks is also to give some career advice to our students who are on the job search and want to understand the dynamics happening around it. And we started there at Metals
Associated Metals.
Associated Metals. And you started, if I recall correctly, as a trafficker, and you just told one of my students you can't go on trading if you're not a trafficker. And that's something that I'm not familiar with anything like stocks and bonds. It's a unique trade of commodities, and I'm curious to hear more
So
about
it
it.
is really the starting point. Anybody goes into metal trading, you have to know how to move the goods as part of the cost, obviously. But if you can't move it or position it globally in the proper place, it's actually worthless.
I see. So if I got like a great deal, but then I don't understand it, my metal is stuck somewhere overseas and I can ship it, I'm not able to do the profit.
I mean, right now, in the Middle East, in the Straits of Hormuz, you can't move anything. The oil's not going through. So you have a serious problem because of just transportation. And that's affecting the price of oil and gas globally.
So the supply chain is always a big part of how you're thinking about trading
Correct.
everywhere. And you did that trafficking for about a year and a half.
from.
And what were you trafficking back then? Which metals or which?
Stainless steel scrap,
Okay.
100 containers a month. It's a lot of containers.
Yeah, that is a lot of containers.
Okay.
And then, after 3 years at Associated Metals and Minerals, you, if I understand correctly, you kind of got poached by the three brothers, if I understand this right.
Somebody approached me, somebody actually who lived in my building,
Okay.
and the business was booming,
Mhm.
and they needed more people at Philip Brothers.
Yeah.
He knew I worked at Associated. It just happened to be the commodity they were looking for was the commodity that I was in.
Oh,
So he goes, would you consider coming over? He had no official title. He was gonna introduce me to somebody. He introduced me to Pearl Fontek, who is the sister of Pinky Green.
okay.
I'm sorry, yeah, Pinky Green, who worked with Mark Rich.
Oh, okay. And when you, I'm guessing when you learned something about one of the commodities, it probably takes a long time to get fully immersed, to become an expert.
Well, they asked, when I went for an interview,
Yeah,
they asked me to come over. I said, I gotta give Grace 2 or 3 weeks' notice.
yeah.
So somebody said to me, you'll get about a half an hour if you're lucky. So I went back to tell Associated Metals. I got 29 minutes, and I had to leave. I was escorted off the premises. I went over to Philip Brothers, and I sat down at the desk, and nobody had to tell me anything. I just started working. I
Wow.
didn't need any advice.
Oh, wow.
I was handling the same commodity.
Oh, wow. So you're calling the same people, just now you're suddenly calling from big brothers? Yeah.
Actually, bigger players.
Bigger fans. And a few years later, as well as being part of the Solomon Brothers, and the Solomon Stability Company, you were invited to lunch 6 times by someone who is the CEO of a med group company.
Correct. So I'll tell you how that happened. Philip Brothers was coming to an end. The era was coming to an end, and Philip Brothers was having problems for different reasons. I don't think we have the time for it right now. So I decided I wanted to stay in the metal business, which I enjoyed. I wanted to specifically go into one metal as opposed to several. And I literally made a radius circle around Manhattan. There were plenty of jobs there in the metal industry, and there still are today, lesser degree. I made a radius, and I looked at the location and the metal. And I ended up with this person in zinc who was directly across the street from me, back on the other side of Rockefeller Plaza. So I called him up. His name was Ted Diamond, very fine gentleman. It wasn't really a meeting in the sense that he had no job. He didn't know why I wrote to him or why I called him. So we had a chat, and he said, come back tomorrow. By this 6th chat, I was enjoying his company. I said, I got better things to do. He goes, okay, you can start tomorrow. I said, fine, what's the job? He goes, here's a desk, whatever you want. I did not know at the time that he was buying a second plant. One plant was fully operational, and he had somebody who was an accountant who was doing the sales for him. He did some sales himself, and he was buying a second facility that was dormant. That's why he needed some young blood.
I see, that was a zinc plant.
It was a zinc operation.
And you joined the company and you were there for 19 years, if I
I
recall?
would say just about 20 years.
20 years, and when did you become the vice president of sales?
I think immediately.
Wow. And you grew with it.
I voiced any time. Yeah, but the gentleman they had who was doing sales, a very fine gentleman, his name was Mr. Ash. He was a controller, and he was really an accountant. He wasn't a personable person. He wasn't going around doing sales. And Ted Diamond was older already. He was doing sales, but he needed, again, young blood, and he was buying a new operation. So basically, Mr. Ash just said, do what you want.
Oh.
But when it started, I could only get new clients. That wasn't that easy.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a challenge. And I get it, relationship is a central part of all the career trajectory. Yeah.
100%.
And when you were there as a VP of sales, would you say that that was it? And you'll talk very soon about your own company, in which I think the position, although one may look at it as a distributor, it's actually a finance position, it's a financial intermediary. As a VP of sales, would you say that there were dimensions that were more financial intermediation, or was it more about relationship managing and just generally being part of a
sales is always about relationship.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break into new sales because people typically are loyal to suppliers.
Yeah.
I'll give you an interesting example. There was an account, Triple M. They're based in Bedford Heights. I knew they were using 2 truckloads a month. How I knew that, I do not remember that part, but I remember how I got the account. I was speaking to the guy, the buyer, and a very professional man, and he said he used to live in New York, and I don't know how we got talking about food, but we were talking about food, and I could tell he missed New York deli. Okay, I made an appointment, I packed a cooler, and I took him from Noah's Ark deli sandwich.
Wow.
So when we were there, I came like the morning about 11:30, primed for lunch, and he said, I'll take you down to the cafeteria. I really do not have time to go outside with you, to another restaurant or something. Forget about kosher. And I said, actually, we don't really need to go to the cafeteria. We could have lunch here. And he was looking at the box the whole time. Pastrami sandwich, 2 truckloads a month, the next 20 years.
Amazing.
It worked.
Say,
It
good
was
deal.
good pastrami.
Good deal.
And then you were there for 19 years in the company, and in 2003, you started your own company. How old were you when you started it?
How what?
How old were you when you started your company, your own company?
How
How old
Oh,
was your age? More or less.
Oh.
20?
22?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was probably about, close to 50.
Yeah. I'm asking because it's hard for me to imagine that with family and children, it seems quite a consuming thing to start your own company. You told me it's 24/7.
It is very consuming, and I actually worked out of the house for a while. And we had built for myself an open loft office. I really had no physical closed door. And kids were actually pretty good. It was really, it wasn't so much even Erev Shabbos. Every Yontif, the place was like a zoo, nothing I could do. Did not work. Not quite sure what I did at the time.
So, you started your own company, and from what I recall, Eagle Zinc was being sold to a company in Mexico that were buying all the capital and moving to Mexico, and they offered it to be their representative in the US.
Correct. The gentleman that I worked with was ready to retire, but there were some environmental issues at one of the plants, Eagle Zinc at Hillsborough, Illinois. It was going to become really a small Superfund site. It was really corrected very quickly. Wasn't that much of a big deal, but it was his time to retire. So we were buying certain materials from a company in Mexico. So we came to an understanding that that company would purchase technology, purchase some of the equipment, move it to Mexico where they were situated and well into the zinc business. But they were going to make more types of zinc oxide. But the key to that was that they would have to have somebody in sales to promote it to the industries where we had been selling to it. So I was like the third part of the triangle. And so it was mutually beneficial and mutually agreed upon.
Yeah. And you start Perl Pigments, and before we get into what exactly Perl, before we get into what Perl Pigments does, and talk a bit generally about the commodities market, and continue from there to assessing the recent dynamics we've seen in the market, both in recent years and mostly in the recent weeks. I would just like to make a small stop and ask if there are any questions from the audience. Yes, Bob.
How do you make money selling zinc? Because it's a
That's-
commodity.
That's the next question I'm gonna dive
Okay.
deep into. It was David, exactly. Okay. Further questions?
So we'll wait, I'll defer to this.
We're gonna wait on answers.
In a second for that. Other questions about, yeah?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, obviously, I think Assa touched on it, that this is a profession where you need to have good relationship with people, right, and good people skills. But also, for the pastrami guy, you said that you knew he has 2 truckloads, so you sort of took him from someone else. But how do you know, did you check who is using zinc and then asking them, do they need zinc, or do you really just see who is already buying zinc in the market? Do you do business development?
So we do business development. When we bought the plant that was dormant, it went from a company called Eagle Pitcher to actually a paint company called Sherwin-Williams, owned it for a short period of time. It was really an Eagle Pitcher plant for 45 years. They were very well known, so the plant went dormant. But I was already selling product for the other company, Meadowbrook, zinc, it was zinc powder, zinc dust. They were based in West Virginia. And I had geared that away from sales to the chemical industry to sales to the paint industry. So when we started Eagle Zinc, it was my job really to decide what to make, basis old historical information that we had, and basis my knowledge where I already started selling to certain industries. So I really focused on paint and coatings since we had somewhat of a rapport from the first plant. But to go from a dormant operation to decide what to make, sell it to clients and sell about 600 tons a month, it's not an easy thing to do.
Right, okay. And then another question, which I don't know if you're gonna touch or not, but at least for me, who I'm not really familiar with zinc in general, but I know we talked about it a little bit before. Where is zinc coming from? And because I know that you said that the United States doesn't necessarily produce zinc anymore. So how did the zinc industry in general change in that? And does it matter to what you do in the sense of selling commodities? Do you care where it's mined, how it affects the price, those kind of things?
That's an excellent question. There's no mining of any type in the United States anymore. You cannot build an evergreen plant. And zinc mining stuff in the 70s, there were actually physical plants in upstate New York and upstate New Jersey. There still are some copper operations in the middle of the country. You can't close down an operation either because it's a Superfund site. It's a serious problem. So there are some copper sites, but there's no mining in the United States anymore. We are depleted and the EPA will not let you produce anything, which is a terrible thing because where are you getting the copper from? The further away, the more it costs, etc. But you still need product. These commodities are traded globally. Zinc, for example, is traded on the London Metal Exchange. So if I buy zinc, I can get it delivered anywhere in the globe at an LME-approved warehouse at the right price that I bought it at. I could get it delivered in Singapore, I can get it delivered in New Orleans. It doesn't make a difference. The freight's gonna make a difference. And I explained before to Assa, there's two components to the zinc metal price. It's zinc metal, what you're paying for the LME price, but there's a premium to get it delivered, and that premium could change and fluctuate quite a bit. That includes the freight portion as well.
That's a dimension of the commodities market, which is very foreign to people who are not to that market, like putting fixed income securities. These are things you just traded and it's electronic and you feel like you should be good to go. We don't have this additional dimension of the supply chain management and the cost, which is quite big. And which also brings me to the question that Pablo so rightly asked and snatched. And I also asked you today when we first met, I stopped and asked you just a second, Ellen, how do you make money? What's your edge? So you could just describe to the audience the model that's called of Perl Pigments. Who are your customers? What do you provide to them? What's the added value? And where are their profits?
So while I've done metal trading, now I'm really very much physical, and I said physical part. We're mostly in the zinc oxide business, and we do some business in the zinc powder or zinc dust business as it's known. So zinc oxide has many different applications. I'm dealing with a plant in Mexico that I know for several decades.
Right.
They are physically producing zinc oxide. You're taking raw zinc metal or zinc products, putting it through a furnace system, and they've got many furnaces, and you control the airflow to make different types of products. Some products go to the rubber tire industry, some go to the paint industry, chemical industry, animal feed industry. Poultry and cattle get a 72% greater zinc oxide, without it they die.
Oh.
Almost that simple. Those are the animal premix. As a matter of fact, there's a company that's offshoot of Philip Brothers called Fiber Chemical that actually supplies into this industry.
And they need to, so you source it only from this provider or only from this
Right, so I'm
company?
sourcing this, we have I'll call it a handshake agreement for many years, decades,
Yeah.
where two ways that we're making money. One is with commission-based, we're selling to big clients certain products, most of them are contractually agreed upon.
Yeah,
I represent them or get a commission.
yeah.
The better part of the business though is we have our own warehouses and I take possession. So I am buying zinc product, the same thing like buying zinc metal, but the zinc oxide is just really powdered zinc metal, it's the same thing. But it's based on the LME and a slight conversion cost to make the finished product. I take possession, so I'm buying it. So I'm buying it very carefully. I watch the LME, London Metal Exchange market, is twice a day, morning call and afternoon call, and it's a cash and a 3-month spread. So you gotta keep your eye on the ball. Everything I ask Karen every night, what's the $64,000 question? The price of zinc at 6 a.m. You could watch Bloomberg, you might get a jump on it. But it's a market that's based in London. If you're buying copper, you can buy that, COMEX anywhere. You can buy it in Chicago Exchange, New York Stock Exchange. So it's different. The zinc is a very small commodity. It's essential to life, but it's a small commodity. It's only traded in London, which is a small, and it's like a small ring clip that they used to have here, is where your literally raising your hand and giving an eyeball, that type of thing. I mean, they use, of course, electronics today, but it's really a small group of people. I can buy zinc anywhere and have it placed anywhere in the globe, but we need product, in Mexico to make the product. I'm selling to Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies. The better part of the business is selling small quantities because not everybody's large. So you have a small paint manufacturer, he needs 20,000 pounds. I get a better price in selling small than I do big.
I see.
So the business is really twofold. It's representative and actually selling as our own. We have 3 warehouses.
And when you purchase, you said you look at the price of the zinc once a day. Are you purchasing in the market, that's called it, or are you purchasing only through the distributor at their price?
So we're watching the price of the metal, and I'm buying the finished product from Mexico based on that price of metal.
I see.
So it's a different form, but it's basically
I see.
pure metal. So I got to know the price of zinc metal, and every day you buy different. It could be 2-3 cents a pound. That could equate to different $4,000 for a shipment.
And if I'm looking at a large company that's trading with you, that's sourcing it from you, I think that the question Pablo was asking, why aren't they just sourcing themselves from a plant in Mexico or something similar? What's the role, or what's your role inside of the creation of value there? Why do they need to go?
I represent them into certain industries. I introduce them to the marketplace.
Yeah.
I control it. We have agreements. You just can't call it mine. It doesn't work like that.
I see.
The guy making the product end line is not going to speak to you. They do have a sales staff. They're really dealing with me. So they have their own large accounts globally, and then they have several, you can call them associates or distributors that represent them to certain industries. They knew nothing about the paint industry.
Interesting.
I've introduced them, and I even take them sometimes, with me. But I know the business, I know the sales in it, they don't.
So you're an intermediate between different corporations of different sizes and between the zinc markets.
Correct.
Okay. And we talked before about the timing of the trade. And you told me that one of the main key factors that determine what you're able to do is you know where to buy. So I would be happy if you could talk a bit about it. What guides you? Could you give us an example of a time you chose to trade or chose not to trade? What did you see?
We recently started another type of zinc business. I thought specialized only in zinc products.
Okay.
So we're now starting to bring in zinc anodes from Peru, from South America.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking to buy one more load in this past week. We just bought it.
Yeah.
Every day the market changes. I could take a spot price. I could take a 3-month average. I could take a monthly average. They're willing to give me any message that I want as long as I tell them in advance. If I decide to buy in the spot, so I am watching the market daily. So what's been going on, the markets are very high. I mean, copper's at a 6-year high right now. Zinc's at not a 6-year high, but it's very, very high. But there are hiccups in the market. Trump sneezes and the market reacts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sneezes twice, I buy.
And then a part of what you're doing is you're buying, you're sourcing, and then you're selling to your
Right.
customers, and you're making this spread there.
Correct, so I make a spread. So again, in some part of the business where I represent, I'm getting a commission, it's a set amount, which I think is fair, but of course it's never enough. But when I control it and I buy this Perl Pigments, I'm determining when I buy. So I just bought a load today for May 1 as opposed to April, because the market is drifting lower, and the price will be lower. Can I guarantee it? My gut intuition tells me it will be. It's probably about a nickel lower.
And that's something that you need to really know the market. Even if I know finance, I cannot just go into it and understand what's happening. I see a drop, I think it's Trump sneeze, and I'm completely oblivious of what's actually driving the price.
It won't work. You gotta be in the market for a while.
You need to feel and know all the underlying forces that are playing a role. And if you need to map the main kind of factors that determine the prices in this market. So we have the supply chain we discussed before, we have the geopolitical that we'll get to very soon. What other factors do you think need to be taken into account when you're doing something like trading commodities? Which other big things you're looking at?
Fundamentals used to count till approximately 10 years ago. So it's basic supply and demand. And,
Okay.
if there's a mudslide at Codelco,
Mhm.
in South America,
Yeah.
the price of copper will soar.
Okay.
You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So different factors, supply and demand is critical, but these fundamentals don't count anymore. It's really geopolitical events.
Oh.
That's what really counts. The price of oil affects everything. For us to produce zinc oxide, turning the furnace with gas, is going to cost us more money.
Interesting.
It's gonna cost us more money to transport the goods.
And is that because is that because we have less stability perhaps in terms of the geopolitical reality, or is that because of some
There is
changes?
exactly correct, there is much less stability today. Listen, the tariff situation was a crazy situation when President Trump came in. He means well for the country, and I think he'll accomplish something. And a normal tariff of 5 to 10% is manageable. People would not be barking. You put on 39% on importing goods from Switzerland. You stop the entire watch industry. I wanted to buy a watch. I held off.
Yeah.
Mine is a watch.
Yes. And I'm assuming the industry is also affected, like, well, the rest of the market, of course, the interest rate environment. And another thing that I know that we talk here a lot, and we're talking a lot about trading the spot market. But from the little I know about the commodities market, most of the trade, or the volume of trade that is bigger, is the volume of trade of what we call the derivatives, the futures and the options. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit about it, about why do we have such a central role for derivatives in commodities, and does that require a different apparatus and a different state of mind, facing different type of challenges?
So you can buy futures, you're kind of predicting, you're paying a slight premium for it, it's not for free.
Okay.
It's not for free when you buy futures, it costs a few pennies in between on the trade.
Mhm.
So let's say I'll take one example. I have one very large account, a Fortune 500 company. And they stopped doing this about 6 or 7 years ago, but every year they would approach me, we want to hedge the position in zinc. They were buying a zinc product, they weren't buying zinc metal, but it's based on metal.
Yeah.
So they would decide to cover or hedge like 1 million pounds to 2 million pounds a year. So at the beginning of the year, at the end of the last quarter, the previous year, we'd say where the market is, and they're concerned that it could go up. It can go up 5%, 10%, go up 50%. So by hedging it, they quantify it and they stop the upside. It's like a stop loss at the top.
I see.
So we would go out and we would hedge. We would source zinc metal from the LME or from a metal producer that we know, buy the 1 million pounds and not pay for it in advance, but have an agreement at that LME price that we decided to go forward on that decision. So that covered them for certain, probably 25% of their requirements. They felt if they hedged, they'd be safer. And that's correct. By the way, the market could decide to nosedive or even go just moderately lower. But they felt they had to protect a certain part of the production. So they were making a paint, they're buying several raw materials. Zinc is expensive, copper is expensive, and copper also goes into certain paints. So they decided to protect a part of it. So that's smart, but if you protect all of it, it's a crapshoot. It could go the other direction on you, and it costs money to hedge. Actually, talk them out of hedging. But you can buy spot, and you can buy spot for 3-month pricing, and you can go forward years. But you gotta cover it, and it's gonna cost you.
Yes, yes. So for those of us, some of our students are less familiar with futures, some are in their early years of their studies. Just to be familiar, a future contract just means that instead of just buying from you now, I don't know, a ton of copper, we're just agreeing that I'm gonna buy from you a ton of copper, say 3 months from now, for a certain stated price. By then the price goes up, I have a big win, I buy cheaper relative to the market, sell one and sell buy the other. If it goes down, I'm not doing that great. And what Ellen is talking about here is hedging with it. If I know I need to source a lot of material, I might want to buy future contracts, and that smooths my future expenses. As need be, of course, it also exposes me to risk. Do you think that the size of the derivative market, which I know has developed a lot in the US, you've probably seen it developing over the years, with more, let's call it financial liberalization of the markets. Do you think that's a part of the reason why we're seeing a disconnect from fundamentals?
No, I don't think that's the reason for the disconnect. I think geopolitical events are so severe today in the last, decade or so, that it really impacts them. The current crisis is just a perfect
Yes.
example.
Yes.
It affects everything you're producing. Iran's trying to hold the world hostage.
So, and yeah. Okay. So maybe that really leads us to the next topic. Before we move to the next topic and start talking about the recent developments, again, I'm going to stop and we're going to take some questions from the audience. Yes, Sam.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you again for coming in. So you were mentioning about the major corporations, how whether they are not doing their own hedging, but you yourself are very much exposed to the direct cost of the commodity, as this is your business. So especially in the physical space, do you do any of your own hedging, whether in a physical way or on paper trading?
I probably take what I call short hedges, maybe for 3 months at a time. I won't go very long, and I really keep a cash position, and I am really spot business, but I know what the clients are taking. These are long-term clients. We're always looking for new ones. So like I'm asking my son who works with me, he's working on new possibilities. Every time he gets somebody new that's not part of my equation, I'm really covering what I know. So I gotta have extra. But I try to cover several months at a time for different reasons. Geopolitical events, anything could change. Tariff, the border gets closed. You've got to stay ahead of the curve. The Mexican border actually been pretty slow, and the threat of tariffs, actually, we had tariffs on us for 1 full week, and luckily it was canceled. We were exempt from the original NAFTA, so our product is exempt. By the way, we don't produce zinc products in the United States of America, we're not going to have tires. So it's a complicated problem. But I take cash position mostly, and I go a little bit forward, but gingerly so and not too far.
It's, Rena, and then
Hi, my name's Rena. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. You mentioned before a little bit about what the main drivers in the commodities market are today, that is Trump and geopolitical events. I'm thinking in, say, like 5 years from now, Trump is no longer president. We've hopefully reached a point in time where there's, I'm gonna say, less extreme events happening, it feels like every day now. What do you feel like the main drivers of the commodities market to be at that point in time, when the things that are driving today are no longer as relevant?
I mean, it's an excellent question, but the trend has been, it's not just because of one person, the current president. The trend has been going that direction in general. But you're correct in the sense it really should go back to basic fundamentals. Supply and demand is really what needs to govern. Now, but if something happens, and to take right now oil, so that will directly affect every metal producer. Because to mine it out of the ground, you need power. So you're using gas, or oil, and we're making the zinc oxide product. We've got 12 furnaces going, and our gas bill is going up dramatically. We've got to charge more, even if we have an agreement. So, and when the tariffs came into play too, so that was a problem. But it was understood that we would absorb the tariff maybe for a few weeks. That's really unfair to us, but that we would have to apply the tariff immediately on day 31. They weren't happy about it, but they understood it. So it is geopolitical events. So take away President Trump, whoever's the next one, the next president to come. But it's a global thing. It's just not based in the United States. We should go back to fundamentals that would be healthier. I hope it happens. I'm not convinced it'll happen.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? So you have 2 questions. The first one is, what is the handshake contract? Because that's very interesting. How do you, it's probably a relational contract that it's not signed. The second question is, I want to share a little bit of my experience. I am from Chile, and my country is like your business, but on copper. The whole country depends on copper. We call it the salary of the country. And I've been following, I was lucky to be part of the government 20 years ago when they were devising how to spend the money from copper and development. So I was part of the innovation strategy. And everybody said back then that copper was going down and said, it's a commodity. We will never know what's going to happen. Now our conversation is copper is going up, and the prediction is that it's going to stay up for the foreseeable future. But I'm not so sure again about that, because as the price goes up, you also have seen during your experience that there are substitutes that are popping up as well. So my second question is, how uncertain do you think is going to be the price of the metals, given geopolitical conditions, which might change or not, but in general? So 2 questions. The first one was handshake contract. The second one is it the case that there's going to be a commodity that was always going to go up in price?
The only people that make money on contracts are lawyers. There's nobody else. If your word is not good, don't be in the room. As a matter of fact, Aramis told me a story about his father David, Poland was turning to be capitalistic. This goes back, I don't know how many, 30 years ago or something. And David Michener was buying huge property. The deal at that time was $750 million. Wow. Okay, and the deal was done, and they met in the room to finalize things, like the closing of the contract. Somebody asked him to sign the document. He goes, I don't sign anything in my life. I'm willing to shake your hands. That's about it. So the guy said, you got to sign it. Really, it's a big deal. It was big for you know, for Warsaw, for Poland at the time, and it was big for David. But David saw no reason to sign the thing, so he stood up and he left. They called him back. They shook his hand. The deal went down. Contract. I mean, you have to put things, you know, in writing. Obviously, you sell a house, you go to a closing, you put it. But if your word is not good, I've had closings of our personal home, but the guy kept on changing his mind, and the market's drifting lower. They try to get something out of you. I don't know if I answered the question.
So yes, but I was asking about, because you mentioned that that was a contract with a Mexican factory.
So, you know, I've known this company probably for over 30 years. We recently, about a couple of years ago, they said something about signing a contract. It doesn't do me any good. If they're not good at their word, if I'm not good at our work, it's not gonna work. And if you have to sue somebody, you know, for your cost, that doesn't really work either. So yes, most people do sign things, and it's okay. And the lawyers, that's a job too, they gotta get paid. But it's I don't know, it's not such a necessity all the time. So for a legal document to have for your home, you need a deed, it really has to close, you gotta have a signed document. I sell to clients, sometimes they've approached me for contracts and we get into it. I got a 100-page document from a client and it's like 9 months later and he never asked for it back because I think he realized there wasn't really much point to it. If there's not goodwill and the business doesn't work, it just simply doesn't work.
So that's very good, because that answers my question. The value added is reputation, that you build a reputation. There's where you add the value to.
That is 100% correct.
That's very interesting.
And the second question?
The second question is, given your experience, is there such a thing that the price of a commodity or a metal in this case, can go up indefinitely?
So nothing goes up indefinitely. Nothing's a straight line, not like the stock market. But the trajectory right now for copper and base metals really is straight up. There will be hiccups along the way for sure. There's not enough copper produced. What's happening now in the last year or two with AI, and to build an AI data center, I don't know how to describe it to you, it's much bigger than Wolf Campus. You could take 10 football fields, that's how large these data centers are. They all take a lot of iron, pure copper, a lot of copper. So the market in the last 2 years has moved up about 30%. Will it go down? It'll ease down, but I think the general trend is up. The necessity is there, it's critical. By the way, China consumes precisely 50% of all base metals. China is in a poor way right now. They are not in a good state. They're trying to change industry to make it consumer driven, but they consume metals, they make products, and they are really down. That will change, I assure you. The question is, how long does it take them? Another year, 2, 3, when they start consuming, zinc is not saying it's $6,000 a metric ton. I'm sorry, copper. The price is going to change. It's going to keep going up. If you're looking to buy stock, pick a copper company. I won't say which one.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm in the Masters of Finance program, so my question is a little bit more finance oriented. It sounds like your company is very profitable and you want to keep cash on hand to make those cash purchases for the commodities. I understand that's part of your job where you want to get the best price. Sometimes you're going to have to pay an extra premium for the logistics of transporting the commodities. My question is, what do you do with your equity? Do you, with your profits, in other words, like, are you kind of keeping a lot of it on cash to manage your net working capital, or are you trying to leverage so you can grow? And also, would you consider mergers and acquisitions? Like, do people come to you and say, oh, I'd love to have a stake in your company, or would you consider taking a stake in a logistics company as well, because that might improve your stake in getting a cheaper freight rate?
Well, I did look ahead. When my son was in high school, I took him on his first trip, and in college, I think I took him on 3 trips. I took him to the plant in Mexico that I was dealing with, and I took him to a couple of conventions, like a rubber trade show, which is quite large. So thinking ahead. So the cash position, like we're buying a lot of zinc oxides. I'm paying for a lot of metal in a different form. We recently took on another product called zinc anode. Give you an application of zinc anode. So we buy a 2-inch zinc metal ball. It's used in the plating business, and they galvanize nails and screws with it, so it'll last longer. Zinc anode, a large bar, can be placed on the hull of a vessel to anti-algae and fungus, because if the algae get onto the vessel, it slows it up, it costs them more money in gas to power it. So I keep a cash position. So I'm doing a lot of zinc oxide business. We took on this new business recently, this anode business. For me to pay for a load, it's $82,000 2 days ago. So I have to keep a large amount of cash. You never know when opportunities, arrive, but I'll just keep it in the money market available. But we're always looking to grow. And my son gets a new client. He got one in anode who took half a truckload. I needed my next shipment like immediately. So you can't wait. You have to have cash on hand. I prefer not to leverage and borrow. I mean, I could borrow from the bank, and I'm keeping the bank happy because I'm paying them for their money. I'd rather they pay me for it.
Okay, yes, Bennett?
First of all, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. I mentioned before I was in Kalama and I saw all the copper mines there, and most of this stuff is mined in third world countries, and you mentioned that the US has kind of killed mining domestically. Do you envision in the future, as China controls 60 to 70% of rare earths, that the US might dig in? I know like 20 years ago, the highest market caps in the stock market were all oil companies, Exxon, BP, and now it's kind of all technology companies. You see Apple, Tesla, et cetera. So do you think there's a way that we go back into the mining business, maybe a large award bring us back, or do you think we're always going to be shipping in perpetuity?
It's an excellent question. I do not think we're going to the mining business. The EPA is too strong. If you're opening up a zinc mine, a copper mine, and it rains, water takes the product and takes the trace elements into the ground and leaches. So you have a serious problem. So I don't think we're going to do any mining here. It's also very expensive to start an evergreen mine. So copper, for example, so you have in Chile, the major mine, but as I said earlier, they have a rainstorm and they have a mudslide, the price of copper is going to soar the next morning. But we're not going to be producing here, so it's all coming from somewhere else.
Do you think that's a mistake?
Well, it is a mistake, and President Trump is strongly speaking about strategic reserve, and you mentioned specialty metals, but even he's talking now about copper as well. So we may take LME positions. We could have the product delivered into New Orleans and just have reserves of copper metal like we do of oil. That'll take the problem away. We don't have to produce it, we have to have it and store it. Then you might have somebody, probably in the GSA department, would actually try to time the purchases so that, like, if we release oil now to bring gasoline on our corner, I think it's $3.63 at an off-brand place. It's going to hit $4, pretty soon. So eventually, the president will probably release some from the reserves are depleted. You got to replace them. But wait for a more opportune time. God willing, the war will be over one day, whether it's several weeks or several months. It's not going to go on forever. Prices will come back down, but you got to replace what you deplete. But right now, for metals, I don't see us making anything here at all. Those have to be strategic reserves brought in globally, and you could buy as simple as buying on the LME, just have it delivered somewhere, into a major port, which would be New Orleans most likely.
And was it a mistake when the U.S. relinquished their reserves back, like
100%. 100%.
Right? It was poor foresight.
Bad move.
All right.
I want to ask a few last quick questions about commodities market before we proceed to talking about the recent developments. One thing I was curious about is, we opened the MS program, and part of what we thought was that a lot of positions in the financial industry are becoming more data-driven. And it's happening at different rates for different parts of the industry. I think equities were first to adopt it, and fixed income is still a bit lagging behind. I was wondering if you could tell us about the role of quantitative skills today in the commodities market. How does it enter, whether it gives a substantial advantage to people, or whether it complements intuition and experience, or somewhere even potentially replaces it. I'm just curious to hear your views.
You could use data and historical numbers. You
Yep.
have to change the numbers for inflation. 20 years ago, you're bringing zinc out of around 50 cents
That's
a pound. Today, you probably need about $1.25. Zinc is trading today at $1.37. The current average is about $1.45. Data, information, history will help you, and history does repeat itself. And some of these commodities are cyclical. The United States, I don't think is doing that well. Maybe I should ask Dean Strauss. I don't think America's doing that well right now. I see big layoffs. I don't think the economy is so strong. I think there's a little bit of a myth that's saying it's strong, it's good. I speak to major buyers, they hesitate to buy. They buy what they need, they're not going long.
Interesting.
So data will help it, and it depends how large of a company, but in my particular case, which is a small, family company, it's gut instinct.
Interesting, wow. And, okay, I think when we were talking about the trends, I noticed two main themes. One is a secular increase in the demand for copper, mostly due to the AI revolution we're talking about here. And the other one is greater volatility, due to the greater volatility due to the geopolitical instability. Is that correct too, Karen? And have we seen in the past anything similar to something like the AI revolution? I'm talking about a period in which we're seeing a boost in productivity, especially of capital, not so much of labor, and driving commodity prices dramatically up. That's something we have witnessed in the past.
Not to this extent, but I'd say with the beginning of the internet, there was more of a boom, but nothing to this magnitude.
And when you're talking about China and the big demand for China, I'm assuming the 50% that China imports, a lot of it is just through its role in the value creation chain. They import it as intermediary goods and then export it to the other way.
So they have a lot of mining within China's very vast. They have a lot of mines, different types of metals and the non-ferrous metals. But they consume 50% of the world's metals.
Consume, that is their households consume.
So they need to import all of it.
How come their households consume?
They are so large, they are vast, and still growing, and still building
The size
infrastructure.
of the economy there,
So
it's
the-
very large,
so
but it's not
vast.
50% of the
The
world.
country is vast. When things go bad, they usually decide on another infrastructure project, and they'll build a dam or a bridge in market source.
I understand. A lot, I guess, through investments, because China is a big investor, and assuming also the attempt of China to try to find its way out of the demographic trap it's in through automation probably plays a role there.
Now, when their economy picks up, and it will, it's a matter of time, a few years at the most, I see a bigger boom.
Why do you think the economy there is depressed at this moment?
If I had that answer, I'd be sitting there, I guess.
Because I'm thinking perhaps there is also a secular decline, mostly because of the aging of the population. And we might not be seeing a recovery of China the way it used to be.
It's a smart thought population, but actually restrict childbirth. I mean, you're allowed 1 to 1.2 child in China.
And they stopped restricting, now they're encouraging, but it doesn't help anymore. Yeah,
And imagine if they didn't have that,
yeah,
and you had an average of 2 or 3 children
Yeah.
per family.
yeah,
It'd be dramatic more.
yeah.
China is vast.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you talked about copper as a leading indicator. Talked about Dr. Copper. You look at copper and everything is going to follow. Why is that the case?
100% correct, because it's used in everything. It's vital to everything you do and touch. So it's called in the trade Dr. Copper, and it is the global economic indicator. If you look at the Wall Street Journal Saturday/Sunday edition every single week, they list probably 50 commodities. If you look at copper, you will see what happened in the past week, and it's probably good for the next half a week. And copper has soared. Last week it was down like 4%. It's just a hiccup. Nothing has a straight line.
Yeah.
And listen, the equities market, the stock market has soared. Now what's happened with oil and tariffs, and the stock market's come off. It's still at all-time highs. The market's down maybe a couple of thousand points. But the general trend is still up. President Trump has to get the world through the current problem, and things will improve vastly.
And is copper a leading indicator? Is it moving before anything else? Besides the fact that it's a
It is a-
key indicator.
It is a key indicator.
It's a key indicator, not necessarily a leading one. Anyway.
No, it's a
It's
key
just a key
indicator.
indicator.
The two things that you need to watch is Dr. Copper and Triple M. Triple M makes so many products, so many diverse products, and sells to so many countries, that if you watch the health of 3M company and its stock, you will see where certainly the United States market is going and possibly the global economy is going.
Oh, very interesting.
Dr. Copper and Triple M.
Oh. And people talk about a commodities super cycle. That's a new phrase that is out there. They're thinking that commodities are going to see a substantial appreciation in value in the coming years. And when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the commodities market. We have about 60% of what it is gas and oil, correct me if I'm wrong, approximately.
Could be the number.
30% is metals, where I guess that we have the precious metals and the copper that are the lion's share of that, and then 10% agricultural. And what it appears like to me is that we might just have, first of all, the air revolution, one thing, and maybe that's just driving both the oil prices, gas prices, copper prices, and that's sufficient for everything to move upwards. How do you think about what we're seeing? Is there any type of changes in the macroeconomic environment that make commodities more appealing compared to what they used to be?
And I think as it gets more publicized, and everybody wants to go into a hedge fund business today.
Yeah.
And they want to move money, but the commodities market is vital, the metal market is vital. There are 2 students here that are actually into it and working, the ones that some are into, which is great. It's vital, it's a vital resource, we need it, we breathe it, we use it. You could be a stock trader, that's fine too, you'll make a living. You don't need the stock certificate, you can't live on it.
Yeah. And do you think the rising risk of inflation is another factor that pushes up the demand?
100%. Inflation pushes it, and the dollar exchange rate pushes it. Every time the exchange rate, the dollar goes down, commodities go up, and vice versa. So those are 2, you're mentioning correct, 2 very important factors.
Okay, yes. And what would be your advice for my students who might be interested in going into commodities? What do you think is going to be a first good step in that direction?
You should watch the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. You ever see it?
Yeah, sure.
It is a great movie. Orange Futures.
Yes.
I mean, he's terrific. It's really great. Watch that movie.
Okay.
If you like Hershey's chocolate, I guarantee you they have a cocoa trader, right? Or they're employing, a company that, the buyers
Yeah.
deal with them.
Yeah.
The commodities are important. You cannot cross a bridge without zinc. Zinc, they make a zinc powder that galvanizes the bridge. You sacrifice the zinc after 20 years, and the bridge will survive. If you put a steel bridge in the middle of salt water, what's going to happen to it? Your car won't make it across. Eventually it corrodes. Corrosion, I forget the number, is a serious hundreds of billion dollar industry. The cure is zinc. That's what I sell.
And what do you think about the current situation in the commodities market and in the world as a whole? With the war in Iran, where do you think that we're heading? What are your thoughts about
I mean, unknowns are not good. The word uncertainty with tariffs,
Yeah.
COVID, the word uncertainty is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And I don't see a cure in the short term. Long term, it will be cured. But the price of oil affects everything that we make and everything that we move. Right now, the shipping container lines are parking containers in the wrong ports. And from what I read in the journal, the owner of the goods is responsible to reposition the goods, even though they didn't put it in the wrong place. So Maersk Container Line is saying, we have to bring it, into a different port, not in the Middle East, and you got to pay the difference to bring it to where you need it. It's obviously not fair, but that, keeping the world hostage to oil. Eventually, Trump doesn't play games. He's not bringing Marines and all these items that can change the course of the war. He's bringing them there. He's not going to let another several days go. Something's going to give. We may have to secure the last 10 to 20 miles of the Iran border facing that part of the Straits.
Yes.
So the price of oil affects everything. And when gas goes more than $4 a gallon, people will be bribing in America. That's like the break point. We're not that far away.
And we will see also an increase in the price of food, and I'm sure that too will
Correct.
cause a lot of uproar here and perhaps social instability in more developing
And
countries.
yes, it is. Food costs too much money right now, and inflation. When you have the cost of goods to deliver, so the truck now costs more. I was bringing a shipment from Dallas, Texas to New Jersey, and I was paying $3,650 on a 21 metric ton shipment. Today the price is $4,000. I don't know what the price is tomorrow. I had to eat the difference because I didn't have time to charge the client.
Wow, that's crazy. That's really hindering real activity because you're not able to trade. It's too complicated to do the transaction. You don't know what the price is going to be. Wow. Okay, let's take some more last questions from the audience, I think. Yeah.
We're talking about shipping delays. I wondered how you think the current political situation compares to COVID. During COVID, we had shipping delays, and there were ships that I wondered if that had affected your business.
It did affect the business. Again, the word was uncertainty at the time. It did affect it, but this is obviously a different situation with one country being situated in a spot that I think it's 21 miles across. It's so narrow. If we send 2 American Navy ships to escort every single oil tanker, it's too narrow. Some of our sailors are going to get hurt, and that's just, it's just not a good thing. It's a different, because you have now one country holding the world hostage as opposed to COVID that affected everybody globally. But it's the same situation, price just soars when oil and gas, there's just no end in sight. Keeps on ebbing and flowing. Are there talks now? Are there real talks? The president is saying yes, they're denying it. He sent a 15-point plan. They say they don't buy it. They're down to the end, but one rocket gets through and hurts somebody. But imagine if we try to escort every single vessel that goes through, and American sailors die. It's not a good thing.
I just mentioned that we all feel like COVID passed without really shocking the economy so badly, but that's because the government took a lot of debt to smooth that shock, and now we are starting to feel the pain of that. And I'm sure that shock too, the one we're current one, will take some time to see. Yeah.
You could also argue that COVID's the reason China hasn't recovered fully instead of population. But was there ever a moment in your career when you had a demurrage situation where something went wrong, and how did you recover from that? A mistake? Was there a panic set in?
Well, recently with the tariff situation, if Mexico would be tariffed, I'd literally be out of business. So that was pretty current, pretty recent. There's no real way to get around it. It would be a very expensive tariff, but we don't produce zinc metal here. We don't produce enough zinc oxide here. So it wasn't realistic that it would stay on. And we actually were tariffed for 1 full week, and it came off. But that was a serious scare, currently. It literally put you out of business. Not only that, I don't know how it make tires over here, because we don't produce enough. There's not that many producers of zinc oxide globally.
So it would just be retirement if that happened. You wouldn't know what to do. Would you be able to?
I'd probably sell real estate. I do that on the side.
But companies in the States, you're saying, would be rendered useless.
Listen, Mexico and Canada are metal rich. They have great resources. President Sheinbaum in Mexico is a smart woman. She comes from the same party as the previous guy, and they're not perfect, but she handled President Trump fairly well. She wasn't agreeing, but she wasn't verbally disagreeing publicly. Canada was fighting with him vehemently. So he wanted a tariff tremendously, and it would hurt all economies. We're trading partners with them, and we're neighbors with them. You can't build a house without Canada. That's where we get most of our timber. How do you tariff the timber, and how do you build another house? It wasn't realistic that it would stay on forever. I think he meant well, and there are trade imbalances that has to be rectified, and a modest tariff is okay. But you can't, literally you shut down. What does Switzerland produce? Watches and chocolate. You shut down both industries in total.
Wow.
I still want to buy a watch, by the way.
But I have to say that talking to you, Ellen, I think Ellen constructed one of the most stable businesses I've seen in my life. It took no leverage, everything was bootstrapped. There is a lot of hedging. Sam asked the question about the hedging. There is actually a lot of hedging, and there is a really good fit, I think, of future costs and where money is coming from. And that allowed you to survive in the commodities market, which is a fairly cruel market from what I'm seeing. And I saw that your principles for investing are patience, persistence, and perseverance. And so it's a cruel market. I think it is quite unique, really, the tariffs from Trump, that kind of shock. I'm sure that too would be somehow smoothed out. Okay, next question.
Just a final comment. Chile is not a third world country. I want to just clarify. Congo is. They probably were thinking about Congo. And
I was thinking of Chile, but
it's not a third world country. It's the most developed country, and Alan can attest to that.
It's well developed, and they are the copper industry.
And the handshake contract
It's
work
worth
there.
something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I ask a
Okay.
question? Hi. Henry, I teach accounting. So when we talk to students, I also told you guys, right, calculate is the most important thing. We want to know the trend. So one trend also want a student to know which industry they need to go to given artificial intelligence. So is your industry like regulated? Do you need a license to engage in the business? Is your industry will be safe from the artificial intelligence? But we're trying to say like CPA license will give you, right, give you a job protection. So in your professions,
Well, it's like running, a zinc operation, for example, it is somewhat computerized, but it still takes a man to look at the product and to make sure the equipment's running properly. Would I get into a self-driving car personally? I like to drive, so I don't think I would do it. I mean, I physically like to drive. I don't know, AI will affect the industry, but I feel much more comfortable sitting at Phillip Brothers and trading metal than I would letting some AI creature trade it.
okay, it's the risk tolerance is very low. You cannot, right? You want the tolerance for risk is very low. You want to make sure you have a human touch, where you cannot risk the possibility.
And shake your hand with.
Yes.
And shake your hand with an AI.
Yeah, and AI has to build a reputation.
Yes.
Right.
How do you do that?
Okay, we have a last question.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Drazen. I would like to thank you for coming, Mr. Powell. And my question is, as you've mentioned, with how depressed the American economy is due to the situation in Iran and the previous tariffs that Trump put on, let's say, Mexico and Canada, what do you think America should do in order to improve their economy and also prevent from the depression even going forward?
So we were due to lower interest rates, which would help dramatically, help many different markets. And the president, nominated Walsh, who comes on, May 1st into term. Now, he was going to lower rates probably twice, probably when he came on board, May 1st, and maybe one other time. We were almost counting with industrial applications for 2/4 points decrease. That would have helped the housing market. Mortgage rates would have lowered from 6.5% maybe down to under 6%, or even 5.5%. Loans would be less expensive. A car loan would cost less. Now there's even talk they could potentially raise interest rates. I don't see it happening. I think they'll stay neutral for a while, and if we're lucky and this settles in the near future, in the next 2 months less, I can't see this going on too long. I think the president will have to pull a real trigger. Eventually the economy will pick up, but they really need to lower interest rates. So I do agree with the president, and that's the way to do it.
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. Wonderful. We almost learned so much, and thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure. A couple of things I want to say thank you. First of all, thank you to you, Assa Cohen, for working with me on the phone recently and for the panel discussion. I want to thank Dean Strauss because I feel like I know him forever. I think we've become friends. I enjoy visiting him. You're lucky to have him and his staff, Roz and Tamara. These are great people. I'm going to tell you this one time and one time only. Opportunity knocks. It knocks. It may knock once a year, once every 5 years, once every 10 years. You really have to recognize that it's knocking. Things happen. In business, I'll give one example. I'll give one example personal. I was selling to a large ceramic company that made tile. I knew they were coming to close the facility because they're making it cheaper in Colombia. And I got a call one day, and I knew that the plant was going to go dormant. And they said, we're stuck with 3 truckloads of zinc. They paid for it a long time ago. And they were shutting down like over a year's time. They asked me if I would take possession of the 3 truckloads. I said, at what cost? They said, no feedback. They didn't expect them to be back for it. They just want me to handle the responsibility. It was a little risky because the product was slightly old, but not very old. That was an opportunity. I took it back and I resold it. I got paid double on the same product. Okay? Item number 2, this happens every day in everybody's life. I was looking across the street from my home in Tina, and I see a man in front of his lawn. Okay? He doesn't belong there. I said, who is this guy? So I walked over to him. I wasn't like concerned or anything wrong. He looked like he belonged, but I didn't know him, and I'm the neighbor across the street. So he goes, you didn't know my parents? I said, no. He goes, they passed away a year or two ago. I said, and he goes, they were ill before, so I didn't like see them outdoors. And not friendly with every neighbor on the block. So I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm puttering around, I really need to sell the place. So I go, whenever you want to sell it, just call me. That was a statement. Never saw him again, never heard from him again. 4 months later, I'm sitting on my desk in our house, I was working at the house at that time, and I got a call from Mike Disler. This is Mike. I couldn't think who he was at the time, because I met him once for a few moments. He goes, the guy across the street, he goes, I'm here. He goes, I'm never here, and if you actually want to buy that, you gotta come over now. I said, hey, it's a work day. Can we meet at night? Can we meet, that time, make an appointment, even a weekend, I'll drive to you. He goes, it's not just my job, but I'm the swim coach for a team. My son's in Princeton, he's on the swimming team, and I coach a team. He goes, it's either you come now or you're not seeing me again. I said, I'm expecting the plumber. He goes, my wife will come watch your house. She can let the plumber in. Put your work aside for 30 minutes. I went over to him. I said, you ready to sell? He goes, yes. I said, I'll buy it. And I shook his hand and I walked away. Opportunities knock. So while you might be the guideline and the post to the door, it's up to you to open the door. Opportunity will always knock. Good luck to you.
Plus the universe.
Closing remarks or not?
No, no.